Emi, Cat, welcome to the stage. I'm so honored to get to speak with both of you. Emi, is there anything else you would like our audience members to know about you before we dive in?
No, I think you pretty much covered it. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Cat, same to you. Is there anything else you'd like our audience members to know before we start sharing questions?
No, I'm just excited to be here today. Let's get into it.
Thank you. All right. So the first question that I have, I want to talk about empathy. For my money, empathy is one of the really kind of workhorses of emotional intelligence, along with communication. Could you share a time when leading with empathy helped you to resolve a difficult situation or build stronger connections within your team? I mean, would you like to start us off?
Yeah, sure, no problems. I think what I'll start off by defining what I think empathy means. So for me, when someone asks me that question, I will say empathy is basically saying I understand and I feel you. And it means putting yourself in someone else's shoes and just remembering all those moments when you wish someone took the time out to listen to you and support you when you weren't at your best. Now, the thing is, though, when you're a leader, just having empathy isn't enough. It needs to be coupled with proactive action and the reason why I say this is because if you just say, look, I understand, I feel you, but you don't do anything to resolve those challenges, your empathy can come off as insincere and just leave people feeling alone in their thoughts. So, to go back to your question, when's a time when empathy helped me to resolve a situation? I'll use an example of when I hired someone into my team, and this person came from a role that's completely different to what I was now asking them to do. But to be honest, I think I'm a really good recruiter, I think I can spot talent. So, this person had all the transferable skills that I was looking for, and I truly believe that they would be successful in their role. But the problem was, after a short period of time, I started to notice things that, just kind of concerned me a little bit. And it was really from what they were saying. They were saying things like, I'm not sure if I'm good enough in this role. I feel like I'm faking my way through this. Maybe you've made the wrong decision by hiring me. Now, I recognize that as classic signs of imposter syndrome. That nagging, self-doubt, anxiety, making you question your abilities. Every small mistake or knowledge gap is just like proof that you're not right for the role. But my role as a leader was to try and help them through this. And like I said, just sympathizing, just understanding is not enough. It's a starting point. So I took proactive action. So some of the proactive actions I took was to create a safe space for open discussion. And when I'm talking about what a safe space is, I mean like moments where I was actually going to listen, properly listen, chat about what was working well, talk through their challenges, all to help them to stop internalizing their emotion. And over time, this helped to build confidence. And then what I did was normalize it. Everybody has imposter syndrome. Any company you go to, no matter how senior the person is, I've had imposter syndrome. There are times where you're just going to second guess yourself, sorry. But they're not signs of weakness. They're signs of you being part of a learning journey. So what I did is that obviously I was their manager. I can talk about my what I was going through, but I also pair them up with somebody else in the organization who'd been in their shoes, who can offer them guidance, share their own stories, and show them that look, it's okay. Everyone goes through this, and it's okay to move. You can move past your this current feeling. And then I got them to help them to reframe their thoughts. And from this, I mean you shift your perspective from saying I don't know how to do this to I don't know how to do this yet. And that yet, that three-letter word, that makes a massive difference. And the reason why I say it makes a difference because there's actually power in our thoughts. How we think can shape our reality for better or worse, you know? So, and I also reminding them that this imposter syndrome is really coming from a place of fear, but that fear isn't reality. And like I said before, I pride myself in being a good recruiting professional. And the reason why I hired them, because I saw the potential, I saw the skills they brought to the table. But like any role, there's things to learn, and there's nothing wrong with that.
I love all of this so incredibly much. As you were talking about kind of twisting and refocusing or reframing, because I'm a giant nerd, the first thing that came to me was Star Wars, I think episode one or two, when Qui-Gon says something about how your focus determines your reality. And
Yeah.
it's completely true, right? Because you're talking about, I don't know how to do this, or I don't know how to do this yet.
Yes.
and yet shifts it to the future, not where you are right now, but what's going to happen. So I love how it kind
Absolutely.
of wraps in that proactivity element, and it also serves to highlight that if you are trying to be empathetic and if you are trying to relate to someone on that level, that proactivity is part of it. And as somebody in a leadership role, you have even more access to tools within that proactive
Exactly.
toolbox.
Yeah.
Whereas like if you are somebody's coworker or if you are just somebody's bestie, that proactive element, or that like what do we do now element, could be anything from okay, let's attack the problem, to I'm going to sit here in the suck with you for a minute so that you're not alone in that, because I might not be able to do anything constructively to help you, but you won't be alone in this for this minute.
Yeah. I'll be there with
I,
you.
yes, I love all of this. Kat, same question to you. Has there been a time when the empathy factor has really made or broken that connection with your team? Has there been a point when that was really crucial to kind of gaining control and redirecting a situation?
Yeah, absolutely. It was during the pandemic, actually. I was asked to present to a large group of my peers on best practices and building partnerships in the tech industry. And I didn't have if you didn't have good compartmentalizing skills at that time, you were definitely flexing your muscles during the pandemic. It was a very surreal experience to have the world shutting down around you while you're putting together a PowerPoint presentation. Okay. So, gosh, I just remember thinking, I don't know what I could possibly say at this moment of time that either these professionals didn't already know or that they would find valuable. And so, I really had to spend some time thinking about my audience and who was receiving this message. After all, I had just started working for this massive organization in the middle of the pandemic. I'd never met anyone in person before. So this was not only my opportunity to impart wisdom, but also to make a first impression. And so, after much thought and consideration, instead of focusing on processes and procedures, I decided to focus my best practice around leveraging innate qualities that we were all bringing to the world every day that aren't so much marketed, but definitely necessary in order for us to be successful personally and professionally. And I think that and is where empathy comes in, right? And those best practices can span across industry or community. I call it AARP. No, not the nonprofit organizations for those entering retirement, for those in the States. I'm talking about the ability to be agile, to be adaptable, to be resilient, and to have perseverance, right? I call it AARP. And it's a quality that I knew everyone at the time, and I know everyone listening, even here today, has within them that will make the difference, because we all had to strengthen our own AARP to really make it through. The idea of kind of focusing on these innate qualities really cuts across any perceived barriers that limit our ability to really connect and create community with one another. So I definitely built stronger connections from that talk. And I hope I created some more space for people to realize the power that they already had within them to achieve great things. Oftentimes in leadership, we have these blinders on and we're focused on the task at hand. And so we take a magnifying glass to focus on the numbers, but we are human beings, not just humans doing, right? And to forget that, to me, is the ultimate undoing of true leadership and the chasm from bad to worse in creating those connections. And that's really where I think empathy allowed me to acknowledge that the difficulties that we were all facing together at that time, which I hope not only built stronger connections across the board, but also showed how we can turn our pain into power collectively beyond the confines of our working environment. And that's what I think happens when you start to introduce empathy into leadership.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, I knew that I was going to be on board with whatever you were saying when your first sentence was, or the second sentence was that you had to consider your audience. Is communication is it's one of those, it's a soft skill that gets referred to very pejoratively at times, but it is absolutely invaluable. And being able to communicate with others is not just about knowing who you are, what you want to say, but it's like you said, it's knowing who you're speaking to. It's knowing what they need to hear from you, or what their needs are, and then how can you either fulfill those needs or work towards getting them fulfilled in a way that continues to build that trust. And I think you're right. I mean, like knowing not only that they needed something, but also knowing what you would be able to give them is it's huge, right? You want to be able to give people wisdom, but you can't just start talking and hope that the words come later, or you'll sound like some politicians that I've heard recently. So,
And I mean, you
um,
could tie the two together. I think oftentimes leaders are afraid that empathy means weakness or means that people aren't going to be productive or we're not going to be successful because we're worried about feelings. And that's not what empathy is, right?
we're
Empathy
done
is
with that logic, right?
acknowledging. Yeah, and so as much as we work with tons of machines every day, we are not machines, people.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
definitely.
All right. So one of the things that I think a lot of us recognize, there are very unique challenges in being the only in the room. I'm sure both of you have experienced this. I've experienced it as the only woman in a lot of rooms that I've been in, despite many of the extra benefits that I have, and that I've benefited from being cisgender, heterosexual, white woman. So when it comes to the challenges of being the only in the room, are there any strategies or practices that have really helped you to overcome, in terms of identity, perspective, or even just experience? Kat, does anything come to mind for you?
Yeah, I would say number one, stay informed, right? Build a network internally and externally in your industry so you can understand what's happening politically, the market the industry operates in, the growth potential. What are people saying? What's in Glassdoor? What are the analysts saying? So when you know better, you do better, right? And if you're working for a public organization, attend the earnings calls. Like never stop learning ever. I don't care what anyone tells you. You don't need that certification. You don't need that degree. You don't need to read that book. Knowledge truly is power. So know your ish, right? Prepare, show up, no excuses. I live by the philosophy to be early is to be on time. To be on time is to be late, right? Otherwise known as stay ready. So you don't have to get ready. Your focus really is your superpower. So I know there's a lot of information out there that you have to filter out the noise, whatever that is in your life, if it's naysayers, if it's social media, whatever it is, just get focused. The goal is not to know everything, but understanding what's happening will help you feel more confident in those spaces. I would say the second thing is really to have a whole lot of grace, right? I have met people that have never had a conversation with someone from my background, nor I of theirs, right? Cultures around the world are beautiful and vast. I've traveled far and wide to places where I didn't speak their language and I was a visitor on their land. But one thing I learned is that we all cry in the same language, right? Everyone understands a smile, even if they don't give it back. So there are a lot of stories going on in the background of our minds all day long. Recognize that, acknowledge it. That's why breathing and meditation is so important. It helps to quiet that noise so you can see, real from fake, like storytelling since the beginning of time. It's helped sustain culture. And as beautiful as that is, depending on the storyteller, it can also be limiting or, fiction, nonfiction. I visited a Buddhist temple in Thailand and I got the unique opportunity to speak with a monk who grew up in America. And his advice was so profound, yet so simple. He said, focus on what's real. The air, the sun, the moon, nature, touch land. Like stop the stories and start to center yourself. I think centering is just so critical to empowering yourself and focusing on the good that exists too, because it does exist too. So, yes, there are people out there that are still trying to, figure this thing out called life. I'm one of them. Oftentimes, you are the only person of your background in a space. That's true outside of color, right? And we carry an enormous weight of wanting to like represent for the community and the culture. And we maybe have reason to because there's not many of us that occupy that space. But having grace is important because it makes room for understanding each other and removing some of those biases or that judgment. So, don't be intimidated by being the only in the space. Just show up and show out, right? That's my advice.
Love that.
Hunter, Sanmaya, whoever's recording this, just mark everything she just said, please. Like, we're gonna have to come back to that for sound bites because, like, all of this. Yes, 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 yes. And I completely agree. Like everyone understands a smile, even if they don't give it back. But I I can viscerally remember not just times when I've been shown grace, but times when grace has been shown and I witnessed it. That I think was even more powerful to me and more of an indelible memory because seeing somebody go out of their way for someone else inspires the same. Seeing it done shows you it's not impossible. It's generally not even as hard as you think it might be. And so I love, love, love this effort and the focus on show that grace because dear Lord, do we all need it. All of us, no matter what walk of life you come from, we all need this. Emmy, how do you feel about this? Are there any strategies or practices that have really helped you when you've been the only in a room?
Yeah, there is. I mean, I've been one of the only or one of the few in the room a few times, you know. So just to give you an idea about my background, I live in London, but I grew up in a predominantly white neighborhood. And where I grew up, I was the only black person in the room. When I worked in the Middle East, I worked mainly for construction companies, and I was the only woman in the room. And before going to Middle East and when I went to university, most of my friends, most of the people in the university came from money. I was one of the few people in the room from a lower socioeconomic background. So I've been there. I know what it feels like. I'm sure a lot of people listening in, they know what it's like to be the only in the room. Maybe you've been the only in the way that I've been the only, or maybe it's because you're the only one from your country, or the only one in your age group, or maybe the only one in your family that went to university or college. So everyone's been there at some point in their life. And, how does that make me feel? To be honest, many times it doesn't actually bother me in the slightest. Okay. But that's not every time. There are times when it's exhausting. There's times, like, for example, when I'm having to prove myself, when it's exhausting if I have to challenge stereotypes, it's exhausting if I have to deal with isms or microaggressions. So if other people are feeling like this too, what do you do? What have I done in the past? So one of the first thing I do is that I take up space. So, and when I say I take up space, I'm being me, 100% me. I'm unapologetic. What you see outside of work is what you see in work. So I don't shrink myself. I don't downplay my presence. If I don't feel like I fit in or outnumbered, I don't care. This is me, take it or leave it. And what I say to everybody else, you challenge yourself to take up that space too and be confident in your own voice, your ideas, your perspectives. And why is that important? Because your presence and your contributions matter, and you're there because you deserve to be there. So that is my first tip. My second tip
I love this.
is to transform being the only into being the expert. And what I say
Yes, yes,
by
yes,
this,
yes, yes. Say more words.
yeah. So when I say by this is that if you're the only, you're probably the only one in the room that has your unique perspective. No one else thinks the same way that you do. So if you lean into your own lived experience, and that lived experience could be your cultural insight, it could be your resilience, it could be your ideas that you're bringing to the table, you're bringing something forward that no one else has. And the more that you embrace that and embrace your perspectives and share your perspectives with other people, the more that other people are going to recognize that they have to listen to you. You're filling a knowledge gap that they didn't even know they had. So that's my second tip. My third is to set up boundaries and speak up. So, like I said, there are times when I said it's exhausting, okay, and it's tiring and it can be hurtful. So, by setting up your boundaries and speaking up, this is not just important, it's actually necessary. Because if you're dealing with stereotypes or those not so subtle comments, that's just not an option. You stand firm. So, if someone questions your expertise, you don't let your doubt creep in. You respond with confidence and you respond with facts. If someone's comment crosses the line, you address it directly, but you do it professionally. And the earlier that you set that tone, the less space there is for those moments to keep happening. And also, what it does by setting up those boundaries, you're going to hold other people accountable as well. So as well as holding them accountable, you're protecting your own peace. Yeah. And then what you're doing, you're also creating a better space for the people who are coming behind you. Okay. Third tip, find your allies. Like I said, it can be isolating, but you don't have to be, being the only person in the room doesn't mean that you have to go it alone. You can go and find someone else who'll be your ally. And if you're at work, just remember that ally doesn't need to look like you. You know, they don't even have to share your background, and they don't have to be a manager. They don't have to be, they could be a peer. They could be someone from another department. But whoever that person is, whoever's standing up as your ally, that person needs to be the one who's going to have your back, and they're going to support you, and they're going to speak up for you, whether you're in the room or out of the room. And then my last tip is really for the people who are job hunting. So if you are, you know, if you are job hunting, you want to make sure that you're going into the right environment. Okay. So you need to remember that not every workspace is going to be the right match for you. Okay. So you could go into a place where you are potentially the only person in the room. But how are you going to feel when you are in that room? You want to find a company that values you and supports you. And one of the best ways to do that is to go and ask the right questions during your interview process. So when you're asking those questions to that hiring manager or your interviewer or the recruiter, you're asking questions like, how does your company support diversity? Or can you give examples of how your organization creates an inclusive environment? But when they answer, the important thing is that don't just listen to what they say, because anyone can give you lip service. Yeah. Listen to how they say it. So are they being genuine, or they're just giving you like, robot reverse, rehearsed answer? Sorry. So those are my.
No, you are hitting all the high points. You're literally tapping into every single point that we talk about when it comes to these kinds of questions. Oh my God, like I can't even there's not enough snaps in the world for how many things I agree with. Okay, so I love all of this. And you're right, like listen to how the answers are being given. Okay. Speaking as somebody who did not always look like this, okay. I was not always covered in tattoos and alternative, blah blah. I have been the, little blonde girl that fit the stereotypes, and that was what I thought I had to be accepted in all these various rooms. And it wasn't until I finally found places where I was celebrated and not just tolerated
Yeah,
that I felt safe and I felt confident enough to be me. And the more I am me, the more value I show. And it took me, I'm 38. I didn't start working for Power to Fly until I was 33. Okay, it took me that long to find it, and there are plenty of us who have not yet found it. It does not mean it's not out there. But
absolutely.
absolutely, ask these questions, listen to how they answer. Are they excited you're asking the questions, or are they really wishing you'd rather not?
100%.
I love this. And I also very much appreciate for both of you. You both touched on the fact that it's important to be the first. It really is, and that's amazing. But what is more important is to not be the last. The next person that comes after you does not have to be the only in the room the way you are. They just need to be represented. So whether you are pulling, whether you're building that ladder behind you for the rest of the, little blonde girls who wish they could also look alternative, or whether you're doing it for somebody else from a different demographic that is not represented in that room, it is just as important. Absolutely. Okay. Now, let's talk about leadership specifically. As leaders yourselves, how do you actively work to create that environment so that others can feel seen and valued and heard? Obviously, coming from that perspective and knowing what that's like, one would think that you would then go and build these things, but I think we've all probably had managers or leaders that you think would be on your side and they're just sort of not.
Yep.
So, Emmy, I'm going to start with you.
Okay.
Um, as a leader, how do you work to create this environment that would be the most beneficial to people who are the only or who might be the only at this point in their career?
Sure. Okay. So again, I'll use example of my time working in the Middle East. So one of those companies I worked in, actually inherited a team of people, team of recruiters, because I was heading up a recruitment team then, and they came from all around the world. So mainly Filipinos, Indians, Pakistanis. And I loved them. They were brilliant. I was like, oh, fantastic. You recruited someone, as well as I think I could recruit. But one of the things that worried me after a period of time was that some of my team members, they rarely spoke up in meetings where other senior leaders were present. So immediately I thought, okay, another case, imposter syndrome. So, but I thought, let me speak to them, let me chat to them. Okay, what's going on? Because when I'm in the room with you, you're talking. Other people in the room, you're not talking. What's happening? And actually, what they said actually floored me, because what they said was that Emmy is different for you. You're Western. You are like the other senior leaders, so people listen to you. And I was like, huh, okay, that is not what I was expecting. And what was happening? They weren't actually doubting their own expertise. They knew they were good at their jobs, but they were doubting whether or not their voices would be valued. And that hit me because I knew what it was like to be the only one in the room, like how they felt. So again, like I said, in that environment, it was a construction company. I was the only woman. I was by far the youngest by about, 18 years. And to be honest, I'm not someone, I don't know if you could tell, I'm not a wallflower. Okay, so I don't get intimidated easily, but sometimes I'll go into those rooms and I'm like, oh, okay, what's going on here? Is my voice going to carry the same weight as other people? Are my ideas going to be taken seriously because I'm far younger or I'm a female and everybody else are older males? Okay, so what did I do? I listened to their viewpoints and then I advocated for them, first of all, with the other senior leaders. And I held a mirror up to them because some of them, they didn't realize, or maybe some of them did, they didn't, their behaviors were affecting my team. And so what I
Mm,
did is I talked about the importance of diverse voices. Their voices or other senior leaders there in the room, they weren't the only important people to listen to. You need to listen to people at all levels. That is how we're going to succeed. And so when we're in those meetings and my team was there, I'll say, hey, team member, what do you think? So, and I let them know I was going to do that because I wanted them to know that it wasn't that their voices were wanted, but their voices were also expected. And then if somebody else in a leadership team asked me for my opinion, I gave them the floor, my team members the floor before I took it. So, and what I found is that when I stepped back, my team members stepped up and people listened to them. And when they spoke, I amplified their ideas. So that didn't just mean that I was just going to go, okay, great, thanks for your opinion, bye, but I actually listened to them and I encouraged them to keep speaking and I encouraged them to go deeper into the answers and the reasoning. And what happened? Bit by bit, little by little, they stopped hesitating before speaking. The other leaders started speaking. And then what I realized, like I said, it wasn't that my team needed help finding their voice because they already had their voice. What they needed was to be an environment where they felt safe, they felt valued, they felt empowered to use that voice. And that was my responsibility as a leader.
yeah. No, I think this is incredibly important that you like that we make that connection, right? Between somebody who is not afraid to stand up and take up space, right? Hi. And
Yeah.
then pass that stage and the mic onto someone else. Because there are plenty of people, and I think we all know these people who know crazy amounts about what we're talking about, but they don't speak up. And you're
Yeah.
right. Sometimes it's a cultural thing. Sometimes it is. I know plenty of people that I think should be shouting from the rooftops, but they're not comfortable shouting from the rooftops. At which point, we still create that space and we make sure that their voice is heard.
Yeah.
And I think this is just invaluable as a leader, to not only be on the lookout for these kinds of people, but also to have ideas and options in place for how to elevate them, how to magnify them, how to make sure that they are not falling through the cracks or being ignored in the hubbub of all the loud things that are going on. Absolutely. Kat, how do you feel about this? How have you worked to build an environment where your team can really shine in the ways that you want them to?
Yeah, I believe that great leadership really requires you to understand what drives the people that you're leading, not just the people that you're serving, right? What makes the people on your team want to achieve great things under your leadership? What type of environment would support the best growth? Are the incentives properly aligned, right? And that's not always easy to get right for leaders, right? So that kind of goes back to some grace. But I think there's some obvious 101s, right? Like you're not going to get the maximum sustained output when you publicly shame or berate in front of others, right? That fear-based ruling, it's very low vibrational, and while still controlling, it definitely introduces more risk into the environment and really stunts the expansion or innovation that you can see from your team. I've seen tremendous amounts of talent leave organizations under that type of leadership, and the ripple effects was not good for shareholders near or long term, right? So I have a sunroom in my home, and I've now collected quite a few house plants, and they've just grown tremendously. And the sunroom has the perfect temperature and light, and each plant is unique and it requires something different from me. Like I have to check the soil to see if it's dry and water it when a specific plant needs it. And if their roots are outgrowing the pot, I have to get them a bigger pot and replant them so I can watch them grow even more or not. You know, I could leave them in the same pot and stunt their growth. But I will tell you this, I have never given my plant a bigger pot and not been amazed by how abundant they become. They make my house that much richer. And when I have visitors, they interact with the plants, they go by their own, they feel comfortable in my space. They want to contribute good things to my life. And I think that's the power of being seen and heard and valued in the right environment, right? The opportunity to really grow. And so
Yes.
leaders do the work and get to know the people that you're leading. Remember, we're human beings first and humans doing next. So,
Oh, I love all of this. Okay. I have true to form because I've been so engrossed in the conversation, I've led us over time. But Kat and Emmy, thank you. Thank you so, so much. It's been wonderful to get to know both of you, get to chat with you this morning. I sincerely hope we'll get to do this again soon because this was just so much fun. Thank you both for your time and for sharing your expertise with us. We are very grateful.
No problem at all. It's
absolutely.
been a pleasure.